tell my younger self as far as writing stuff, because a lot of this stuff is organic. You learn it as you go.
It's strange. It's nothing I ever expected.
I want to tell my stories by eliciting emotion in my audience.
So it's an organic process. They sort of layer on top of each other. Each one makes the next layer more obvious to me.
This whole thing could not have gone any smoother.
I usually say squad only in groups of 3. I like the batches, like squat, squat, squat.
Look, guys, this one's not going to be like normal. It's just not.
Welcome to the Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the Melith, who is Kaylin Williams.
That's a big difference. It's like, are you talking or are you doing? What's happening here?
We still have all the pets that think, oh, it's time to eat. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m.
My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium.
Oh, hey everybody! I'll never get tired of that intro. That's great. Scott, you're super quiet.
Welcome everybody. We're all here. I thought I was going to be late because I was snarfing down my dinner, and I ran in here and dove behind the mic.
You got
a little greasy here.
You had epic intro music to welcome you in.
I know, yes, right? I like that.
I was like, yeah, you made it in under the wire, and I can just feel it. I should have the energy racing through me because of that music. It's great.
There you go. Tumble, dive, and roll, ninja roll, and of course that was it. I know nerds says they're having trouble streaming to Facebook.
I popped in the YouTube link on the chats, and hopefully people can jump it on the YouTubes, the tubes of the Ubes,
the tubers, the inner tubes.
Nice.
Well, welcome everybody. It is time for Charlie's our first one, as far as I can tell.
Hi, Charlie.
Welcome, Charlie. I don't think he's going to be listening that much, though. I think he hopped in. He's home today. He's not out driving.
Oh, yeah. He's not driving, is like always.
Yeah.
Working hard.
Yeah. Well, welcome the Keystrokers and everyone else that's listening in or watching in. This is our 4th book chat. Four. And this will take us to probably about 40% of the book. It's been very interesting, but before we get started, Scott, you owe us either a song or any thoughts that you had on chapter 20 or chapter chapter 15.
We'll go with thoughts on chapter. So that was good. Now the songs were very well done, and of course they were very well done. I thought about that. I'm like, I don't know why I'm such a stick in the mud about song and whatnot. So that they were nice. I did like that. But that was a very powerful chapter, and the imagery and the tension rise up. So I did really enjoy 15. I think I actually read on through to like 21 or 22. So I'm gonna have to grab my book so I can make sure I'm in the right place.
Make sure you're in the right place. Gotcha.
It's getting interesting.
So I guess where we left Simon off is he ran away from the inn, did a bit of a dine and dash with brother Cadrak.
And when I read that, it made a lot more sense about the stomach because I could see it. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Why he would do that to get free.
It was well written, and I like how the POV that's given for Simon is that of a completely clueless doofus. I don't mean that in a bad way, but he doesn't. Yeah. Ted Williams doesn't expose anything that Simon necessarily knows. You may get a couple of hints here and there, but it's almost all through Simon's view. And I think in this next batch of chapters, I don't think we leave Simon's view for a while, his viewpoint. So we're kind of in his head in the journey.
Not until it's probably in chapter 21. I think we get some
Mhm.
stuff from the Northmen there. Yeah,
So-
and he's definitely not a Mary Sue, so he's got a lot of learning and developing to do to get the power to win this story.
Yeah.
He doesn't come into the story knowing how to do everything. That's for sure.
Yes. He's lost his first mentor, and he's in the wilderness, right? He's no longer in the ordinary world of the Hayholt, and he's in the special world of Osten Ard itself, right?
Yep.
So we pick up in chapter 16, the White Arrow, where Simon starts right off. We get a settle down, settle down moment, right? This is, I guess, the last chapter. If you think that is the action chapter, this is the reaction chapter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So first thing he immediately does is cry, and he curses God, and then he immediately regrets that, right? He's like, "God, what's happening to me?"
What? Definitely a low point in his.
Yeah, not only did he lose his mentor, and he tries to get some food, and he thinks he finds a friend, and the guy just basically just rips him off, rips off the innkeeper, and basically he sandbags him, right? And
Well, it starts out with "It's not fair," which sounds like a
Right. Yeah.
the temper tantrum of a teenager, right? I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in the woods not eating food. I don't want to be hungry.
Yeah.
This is terrible. I want to go back to the kitchen, and
Well, he should learn that nothing's fair.
Yeah.
He gets older.
And I think Morganus very gently was trying to teach that to him, right? Magic is dangerous. The world is dangerous. And, it's not all about, great stories about knights and battles. It's actually about killing and death and things like that. So,
Oh yeah.
One thing that
Joe Abercrombie does a similar thing with that, but he does it a lot differently, because I was listening to some of that too over the last few months and stuff. And what he does, he introduces a character, and he's done this several times, where he's like, I thought it was going to be this, and my Uncle Joe told me it was a mess, and then he dies horribly. So he kills those little side characters off. A little different approach.
Yeah.
than the main character.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so moving on.
So I think then he's had it for a while, but he realizes he has the manuscript with him, and he actually decides to try and read it.
Yeah.
Very much a teenager thing. It's like, oh, there's a phone. There's a phone in my pocket. Should I read it? So look at it. But it's just like these little vignettes of pieces of story of Prester John's life, because that was kind of Morganus's other life work, was the life of Prester John, which I think he knew very intimately, and has all of the history that Simon doesn't, right? Simon
he's got the context.
Alive, yeah. He's got all the context of what made John Presbyter the King Arthur that he was, right? So
Yeah, but all this history to a teenager seems like so long ago, like it's ancient history. But like to an adult reading it, it's like, no, this was like 15 years ago. 20 years ago, my high school graduation, we're gonna have a reunion soon. It's gonna be our 20th reunion soon.
Yeah.
Like, it just shows that this like ancient history is not that long ago. Like, it was when Presbyter John was a young man, swordless farmer's son. He wasn't born of a really ancient lineage. Is that right? Like,
no,
he's a self-made hero.
Right? Yep.
Yeah.
The songs make it sound like he was, but apparently Morganus is like, yeah, it's not really how it was. Didn't just come over and spring straight into action. He is, it talks about him being there for a year and having to work his way up and figure things out, some stuff like that.
Well, that's the difference between the Bardic tales and reality, right? I mean, it's the difference between Homer's, Iliad and the Odyssey and what actually happened. Right?
Yep.
How many times did Rosy Fingered Dawn come, in the morning and nothing happened? Or
Right.
some, one of the gods, Ares, or
Yep.
Athena got annoyed and smote someone. Right?
Looks like we might be live now in Facebook, so that's good news. So
Okay, good.
get it out there. Yay! And there was great celebration.
Kristen. Yay.
Yeah, I also think it's a very interesting technique that Ted Williams uses as an author, because there's several passages where he says, "I can't even understand this," but yet you still read the information, so you're conveying information to the audience that the character is still basically ignorant of, which is a neat trick sometimes. So,
And you have to be careful to. I think he does a good job of just giving you just a taste, right? Just a little bit. If you give too little, then you're not really giving anything, right? If you just hinted something, it's not good enough. But if you give too much, then you're just basically falling into the rookie author trap of
info dump.
Vomiting all the story onto the page, right? Yeah, to cut that out. Stop that.
You can't you can't explain everything right now, because then there'll be no tension.
Yes, and I don't think there's really much point to what Simon first reads. Really, I think it's just giving a little bit of context, and as Simon says, reading the words, he can imagine Morgana's being alive, which is a nice way of remembering someone, right? If you can remember how someone speaks and their style reaches through the words, then you can remember the person, right? So. This is a very choppy chapter. There's a lot of little scenes kind of stitched together, but I think it's showing a bit of passage of time. I think it happened like 5 days, I think, over the course of time, of him just literally hiding from people and trying to make a decision on what to do. And I think he eventually makes a decision to do what? Do you guys remember?
Well,
what's his decision?
He always tries. He doesn't go to like a little shack or something. Or a
well,
shed.
There's an ultimate destination, right? That he's got to go to.
Oh yeah. He's gonna go look for Joshua.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of the
Neglamond.
Yeah.
He's going to travel northward to Neglamond, which is good. You can kind of use the signs of the sun's progress and like moss on trees and stuff to find your north stars at night.
And it just reveals how little he knows, right? He
knows it's a long ways.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
He's pretty clueless.
Well, he did get one little bit of hope from the manuscript that kind of helps him with his journey. Bottom of page 240, reading about that same swordless farmer's son, Prester John. If he was touched by divinity, it was most evident in his comings and goings, in his findings the correct place to be at the most suitable time, and profiting thereby, which might remind us of someone.
Yes, most suitable time.
Yeah. It was not exactly a fortune-telling or a prophecy, but it strengthened him a little and hardened his resolve. Northward it would be, northward to Neglamond. So, yeah, this is the blessing of the protagonist. Okay, he doesn't have to be the strongest person in the room. He doesn't have to be the best swordsman, but somehow he just kind of always manages to be at the right place at the right time, and that's our Simon for sure.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's a danger in writing at such a young character to have them fully formed initially, right? He is certainly what they chide him for being, which is a castle rat, right? A child of the castle, completely sheltered, completely clueless. But there's a kernel of what Simon is, right? And it's a good person, right? Or he's trying to be a good person, right? He likes Dr. Morgana's. When he finds Joshua, that's who he goes to look for immediately, right? He doesn't hide. He doesn't try to take it. Like you said, he even had that imagination. I have knowledge. I have power, and I have a big piece of information. But he immediately gives it away to Morgana's, right? Because rescuing the prince was more important. So there's a kernel of what Simon could be in here, but he's just too young to really develop it yet. At least
He hasn't done anything yet.
Yeah, he hasn't done anything yet until the very end of this chapter, I think.
Yeah, he does something.
So he comes upon the cottage. I think this is where the 5-day point comes in, where he's, I think, 5 days west of the place that he had.
5 days west of Sistan.
Yep. He found him like hunched over a cottage. Looks like it's basically unoccupied. Unoccupado.
But he thinks he hears voices.
Got in there? Yeah, he thinks he hears something. Which is always suspect with Simon, to me, because is it in his head or is he actually hearing something? And you do get a little bit of the voices, and sometimes it's his own voice telling him not to be a fool, right? And then he stumbles upon one of the fair ones, right?
Who's in a predicament.
The Sith man, in a predicament, trapped in a net, right? I think a weighted net or like a snare where he's hanging down.
Yeah, pinioned at waist and elbows by a noose of a snaky black rope and hanging from a bobbing branch out of reach of the earth.
Yep. And then you get a little indication he does not look like a human, right? He has cat eyes. His skin is a little more golden. He's very slender, very elfin-like, I think, with some differences, right? And I think his hair is lavender, something like that. And he struggles to help him because, one, he doesn't have any tools, and two, the guy tries to attack him every time he tries to save him, right?
The guy's suspicious, rightfully so. I mean, why would you think somebody's going to help him? Nobody's helped him so far, probably.
Yeah, nobody's helped him so far, and he's been captured by a mortal, and maybe he thinks Simon is the capturer, right?
Right,
and Simon's a bit clueless, right? But he's got a good intentions, so he's just trying to help him, and then the huntsman comes along, right, and talks about how he's got him, and then I think we see a change in Simon at this point, right? I don't think he intended to do it, but he didn't want the Sitha to be harmed or killed.
Yeah.
And he ends up chucking a rock at the huntsman, and I think I'm not sure if he kills him. Or if he just,
I think he kills him.
He kills him.
I think he kills him. Yeah.
Yeah, because later when the troll, he talks to him about the dead guy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So Simon kills his first person, right? And that's kind of another crossing a threshold that that he crosses into further into the special world, right?
Because Simon could not stand the cruel spectacle any longer. So he's compelled to intervene.
Yep. And something in him. I think part of it is I think this is a good scene only because of the bad things that have happened to Simon, but he's still, after all the bad that's happened to him, he's gotten lost in the. Morganis died. He's being running through the tunnels. He ends up in the Lich Yard. He goes to the inn. He gets chased away. It's all the kinds of bad thing after bad thing. But then he sees somebody else in worse shape than him, and decides to help him. And then the huntsman wants to kill him. And Simon, I think, thinking about the hung man, right, and the bad things that happened to Morganis, doesn't want that to happen, right? So.
Yeah.
So you show that Simon, a good sign of showing that Simon has a backbone when he called upon. And then I guess this is an interesting scene where you get the change, right? You think he's going to meet who the Sith man is, and no, he gets Binabik, right? So, he meets Binabik, who immediately shows up. So conveniently.
After.
Was he watching the whole thing? Was he going to help the Sith if Simon didn't?
Yeah, well, when I first heard it, I thought maybe the two of them were out allied or something.
Yeah.
The timing was just... So the Sith gets away and then kind of immediately... And then shoots the arrow.
Right.
Shoots the arrow, and then someone calls right right as he's about to leave without the arrow. Go ahead, take it. The arrow, take it. It is yours. Simon should not have been surprised, but he was. He dropped helplessly to the ground and began to cry. Great choking sobs of exhaustion, confusion, and total despair. Oh, daughter of the mountains, the strange new voice said, this does not seem good. That's how the chapter ends.
Yep, this is how the chapter ends. It's a good chapter, right? Like I said, it's got that reactive come down from his flight away, and then it kind of comes back up at the end, right? Where Simon has a little bit of an all is lost moment and makes a decision, and turns out to be both a good and a bad thing, right? The Sith is free, but he had to kill somebody to free him. So,
and he feels terrible about it. He gets physically sick after.
Yes,
doing
right.
the right thing.
I think we get that right. We get that right away, right? Yeah, and it continues on into the next chapter, right? Chapter 17 with Binabik, right?
Yeah.
I remember. So, Scott, what do you remember of when you first read about Binabik? And because the concept of a troll does not fit Binabik at all, right? If anything, I think Binabik is more of a Inuit in my mind.
Well, and I wonder if it's just kind of one of those defied expectation things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because he calls him a troll and whatnot. I guess I think I don't remember a lot clearly. It's been so long, but I do remember this is probably where I started to realize that in every fantasy story world, you're going to set your own things and you can defy some expectations. Like dwarves can be one thing, elves because when I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, elves are small.
Yeah.
But then you get in some books I read, and they're like tall and lean.
They're
and
tall. Yes.
They're powerful, and I just never thought of elves.
Are tall and yeah.
I never thought of elves as being big, powerful warriors because in the Dungeons and Dragons they're like much smaller in stature generally. So, but the point is that you can set that. The other thing that I observed about this was that in the audiobook he pronounces it trawl instead of troll.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't pick
I
that
spent
up.
that whole chapter going did he make up a new race or something? Because I was thinking of the draw, from R.A. Salvatore's books, the draw. But so I was thinking maybe he made up a race, the traw. But then I looked it up in the book and it was troll. Okay, troll.
Yeah. And so it goes back. So some of my earliest memories is, did you guys ever do Billy Goat Gruff?
Yes, exactly.
So one of my first memories of my dad playing Billy Goat Gruff with us on this little tiny bridge. Now I know it's just over a ditch. Not much of a
But when you're a kid, it's a big ditch.
Yeah.
It's a ravine to you.
So my idea of a troll was not the Tolkien idea of this giant creature. My idea of a troll was always something kind of small, maybe a little bit bigger than a billy goat, until I encountered them in fantasy. And so I guess it could just mean lots of different things.
Yeah,
so
there's different lores that you can pull from. I know with elves, I've heard some people say that Tolkien made the first tall elves. That's not particularly true. In the 1800s with the fairy stories, a lot of the fairies and fae were like garden fae and little tiny cute things. But if you go back farther into a Thorian legend, some of those faes were tall, even giants.
Terrifying.
Right. So Sir Galahad and the Green Giant, the Green Giant was part of the fae. I don't know if he was necessarily fairy. Maybe he might have been fairy per se, but he was part of fairy land.
Fae world.
Creature. Yeah, the fantasy world that can kind of get close to ours, and sometimes there's thin spots, which came up in one of our chapters, thin spots between the worlds. So Tolkien was just pulling on very old lore, which means that us authors, we've got all of that to pull from, or you can kind of make up your own thing too, make up something new.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that he doesn't really turn it on its head, but he just mixes up the concept of what people think trolls are.
Yes.
And what Binabik's people are, right? The Canuck.
Right.
Sam Point says the trolls under bridges were supposed to be around a larger human size. So I guess
and you see if you remember your D&D, Scott, trolls were big, right? I think they're like 10 feet tall, but
yeah, rock trolls and giant trolls and different things.
Cave troll.
It also goes back to a child's imagination, because I also remember around that time that my mom would be like, "I'm combing the rats out of your hair." Well, I didn't know what a rat looked like. And so I imagined a rat as being a hair-like tingle, maybe a wasp. And so every time they're going to get the rats out of your hair, I was thinking of this kind of weird, poorly defined gray thing, because I didn't know what a rat was at the time. I'd never seen one. I might have been 4 or 5, I guess, at the time. I don't know. Maybe that just makes me look like a dummy. But the point is that, nowadays readers read a book and they've seen a billion images of magical creatures in movies and all that stuff. But if you were told a story like, early storytelling, 500 years ago or something, and somebody told you a story, it's strictly coming out of your imagination. You have no visual reference because you've never seen an elephant. You've maybe never seen, you've probably seen a rat, obviously, but what would you be? So I would be really interested, it's a little bit off the point, to what people were seeing in their heads, 1,000 years ago when they're telling stories, because there might have been a lot of variance in what each person was imagining until somebody started drawing the pictures and doing all that.
It's like the when you find the skull of an elephant, and that's where it's kind of a possible genesis of where the Cyclops came from, right? Because it had the kind of where the trunk is, and this large empty spot in the middle of its head, right?
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen images recently of like, here's the skull of a hippo, what the drawing is, what the actual hippo is.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw one of those.
Very
recently.
different. And I like the taking of a term that's common and then changing it, right? So it challenged you as a reader to shift gears a little bit, right? So
and
there are nefarious creatures in the world, but trolls are not one of them. Right.
Yeah. Binabik is hands down my favorite character in the book right now.
Yeah. I like Binabik. You're right, Rick. I think it was a mammoth skull. I think you're correct. One of those trunk owning creatures.
Yeah, I like Binabik's voice. Kind of.
I like his voice.
Start. Yeah.
And he's a cool character because he's funny, he's smart, he's obviously courageous because he's handling this stuff in stride. And you sense that he can do things. He's got abilities. He may be small, but he is somebody to be reckoned with.
He's the
miniature
Davy Crockett.
Yeah, he's out there.
He rides a freaking wolf. I mean, that's so cool.
He's got the top creds in that world.
Yeah, well, you even tell that he's special, right? Because he even mentions it, right? He's like, most of my people ride rams, but I ride a wolf.
Yeah.
I'm way cooler.
Yeah, like if you were going to D&D this adventure, who would you be? Come on.
Binabik.
Have to be Binabik.
He's a great character, and Simon is still too green to live in the woods by himself.
Right.
So
he
needs a mentor, right? He needs a new mentor.
Yeah. He needs someone to feed him. He's a poor teenager with the bottomless pit of a stomach. Every teenage boy, and this is a tall one, right? This poor guy, he's starving.
I can't even imagine how hungry, because and this is another, I'm telling a lot of stories about myself here, but when I was in high school, I would get so hungry I would eat paper out of my notebook because I couldn't make it to lunch. I mean, I need to eat. Wow. I was that hungry. So if I was Simon in this, I'd be.
That's how you make spitwads, man.
I could make spitwad, but then I just eat it. I was all the time.
Oh goodness! I don't think I was ever that hungry. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and I ate a lot too. I mean, it's not like I was being starved. I just could not stop eating. And anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the book.
Yeah, it's growing up as a teenager.
Yeah.
Well, now you're living with the teenagers and you're feeding them.
Yeah.
So you know what it takes.
Right. Yeah.
The grocery chart goes like this for a while, right?
Yeah. I remember coming home and and like I'd make because back when you had to make the orange juice out of the concentrate, you guys remember that? So I'd make a whole pitcher of orange juice and drink the whole thing right then, and then like
did you put another one in and put it in the refrigerator and say, hey, I made orange juice?
I made orange juice, and then I drank it all, and then my mom would make because all our houses were all the kids came over, and and I actually had some friends that were just borderline homeless, kind of how they grew up, but she would make 15 trays of cookie dough cookies, on pans, and put them in the deep freeze. We just take one out and either make the cookies or just eat all the cookie dough. And so we'd have these bowls of cookie dough and orange juice after school and just fired it down.
That's awesome.
I don't even know how she kept us all fed because we ate a lot.
Your mom is like my woman goals. That's the woman I want to be.
Yeah.
The woman who feeds the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, and she worked 2 jobs and she would make these giant vats or just the biggest container of chili you could make and then freeze the whole thing and just come home and scoop it out because she was still working and make some chili. But yeah, we ate a lot. So
my parents did that, and we did a lot of leftovers. And my family were a little bit down the pay scale. It was the Tupperware was the giant country crock tubs.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Us too. Use them.
Yeah.
It's easy. It was perfect.
Now they call it food prepping, but that's what she would do. She would just make a bunch of food on Sunday that could be frozen and expect us to fend for ourselves because we're kind of living off the land there.
You're grazing.
Yeah.
You're grazing like cattle.
Good times. So meanwhile, we're amazed that Simon can survive as a teenager in the woods because I'd have to eat my own foot or something.
He's eating pigeons and squirrels and berries and roots. And Binabik is teaching him how to, trap some of these things.
Yeah.
And he's kind of impressed by the way that Binabik is respectful of the food that he's taking.
Yeah, he says, I love this bird. And now I'm going to eat it.
And now I'm going to eat it. Yeah, I welcome it to my table.
And then,
we have guests to entertain.
We got 2 wood pigeons that came to visit. Now we're going to eat them.
We're going to I didn't know if you were going to be able to help entertain our guests being the food they're about to eat. Yes. So I love that humor, that kind of double humor there.
Yeah, Binabik he's a clever person. He's smart, and I think that gives you a little bit more clues that he's more than what he appears to be.
Yeah.
Which is great. But you don't need to know that. You don't need to know it now. Simon doesn't need to know it now.
Yeah, and the reader still might be wondering, can I trust him yet? Even.
Yeah.
We don't know that yet in these chapters.
I mean, he has a wolf, but Simon is probably so starved at this point that he's you could probably just eat me, or whatever you want to do, feed me or eat me. I don't know. And I think he cares for Simon a little bit, right? Because Simon's pretty starving for a bit, and he just needs some rest. I think this is most of that chapter, right? Just Binabik taking care of Simon and teaching him a little bit of the ways of the world, just a little bit. I mean, it's got a long ways to go.
The last thing I like about Binabik in this chapter is that Binabik, he assures us that something is happening. The story is moving now, and you know it's moving because there's this character who is moving. And so even though a lot of the narrative is focusing on Simon's ability to survive and eat pigeons or whatever, not wads of paper, because I would have eaten Morganus's manuscript by now, probably.
You probably would have eaten Binabik's wolf at this point.
Yeah, or been eaten, I guess.
Or been eaten.
But I think when you have a character who's really competent and has traveled, you're like, as a reader, you're assured subconsciously that we're going someplace worth going.
Yeah, so we have a great character who's hyper competent. He's in a lesser way to speak of it, he's like a frontiersman, right? He's an outdoorsman. He knows everything that needs to be done. And he's very confident in himself, right? He's also intelligent. He knows stories and he can read writing. And he's a great foil for Simon, right? Anything Simon doesn't know, he may actually know something.
Yeah.
Whether or not Simon will learn it, if he teaches him, that's another thing.
Yeah, and I think that you can have one character that's struggling like Simon is, but you can't have all your characters do that.
Then it becomes a game of idiot ball, right?
And nobody wants to do that. So this is.
And when this outside character comes in and connects with Simon, it's a hint that we're connecting to with a larger story arc.
Yeah.
There's something moving in the larger world, and our little main character is connecting up with that. Last night I was asking Richard Fox, have you ever read a novel or been watching a movie where it seems like there's not a larger story arc, but it's just event after event after event keeps happening? And that can happen in a journey story too, where you've got a character on a journey and he just faces trial after trial after trial, and you just like, where's the story? Like, I don't feel like there's a story here.
Yeah, this is tedious.
Yeah. So how do you fix that as an author? And I think, Scott, you're right when you said that, like, Binabik, he's kind of a clue to the reader that something bigger is happening here, and it's going to start happening now. So
if you've made a contract with the reader at this point by introducing that character.
Right.
And remember, Binabik is teaching him things, but he's not telling him everything. Like, why is Binabik where he's at? Why is he not home with his people? Right.
Yeah, and where is he at? 'Cause he's going home, but it's a long ways away.
Yes, he's going home, but where is he coming from? And why is he there? Right.
He had a wolf convention, wolf stuff.
Wolf convention, furry convention.
He was at Sturgis for Wolves. Heard of Dances with Wolves? This is Sturgis with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves.
Tattoos and living some beers down there with his other Wolf Rider buddies.
Wolf Rider buddies.
That might be a different story.
They all got tattoos.
I would
Ride
read
wolf or die.
Howl or die.
Facebook user says he sounds more like a guide for the reader.
Yes,
it's a bit of both, right? It's a bit of both. He's kind of picked up the mantle from Morganis to teach Simon how to not die, to learn about the world at the same time. Right? I did find one great sentence that I liked here, but
okay.
I don't know if you guys had some great sentences. I just had a very small, brief one. It's I think in the middle of the book, about where he eats a little bit and he passes out, and then Simon wakes up, and then he gives him a large cup of something warm, right? And I think this was a great little line. He's like, he drank it all. It seemed he could feel it flowing directly into his veins, the molten blood of the forest, warming and filling him with the secret strength of trees. That's like coffee. That's coffee. That's coffee. I just thought you guys liked that one.
Strength of trees.
A very tiny, and if you like to read into it a lot, it could be a little Tolkien reference to the Ents, right?
Yeah.
The water that was the Ent water that they were drinking, right?
Yeah, it gives to the hobbits.
Yeah.
What a great line.
A hat tip.
A hat tip.
Hat tip. Yes.
Now I'm going to use that. Every time I have some coffee, it's like, what are you doing? I'm having the secret strength of trees.
The strength of trees.
Strong as an oak right now.
Yes.
Or strong as whatever flavor of coffee that you have, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, Sumatra or wherever.
Yeah.
Strength of Ethiopian coffee plant. Did you guys have any other lines or passages from this chapter that you especially liked?
I think I've raved about it enough. I don't know but
Binabik, again, is a great character, and fortunately for us, he's with us for very much of the journey. Through the series. Simon really, especially in this book and the next book, he needs a lot of help. A lot. And you don't realize until he's been thrown out of the ordinary world how much help he needs, right?
Yeah.
And then we come into chapter 18, A Net of Stars.
Net of Stars, beautiful.
This is a great chapter. You get a little bit of Binabik's storytelling here, which I love. It has a, how do I say it, Mesoamerican origin creation story to it. I love those kind of tales that bring things into explaining how the world is created, creation stories and such. It's a great bit of mythology building here. I like that. And he also explains how he got the wolf, right? How
Yep.
how Kantapa became his wolf, right? A wolf is clever, 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 and they are faithful as a debt unpaid. Hey, it's like a Wookiee.
Yeah.
A Wookiee that you can ride.
Like when he's talking about the Rimmersmen, he says, Rimmersmen think we are wolf demons in their frost-crazy, blood-feuding brains. It makes you just think of a barbarian.
Yeah. Well, Rimmersmen are very much kind of Northmen, right?
Mhm.
They live up north. The Canucks, the Canuckmen, or the Canuck people, they live in the north as well, right?
Mhm.
So think of it as the Vikings living with, I guess, the Inuits.
Yep.
And not getting along.
And not, yeah, and seeing each other from afar mostly, probably.
Yeah. There's some great lines in this book, or in this chapter. I highlighted probably about 4 or 5 that I got captured, but it's got some. He does a little bit of, I guess, singing or chanting of some lines, and he tells a story of. I'm trying to remember the name. Seta and Kikasut and Tohuk, right? The story of I think Tohuk is the father of Seda, and Kikasut is the lord of birds who comes and wants his daughter, and then once he gets her, he's disinterested in her, right? But she has 9 children immediately. Holy cow. And I guess Kikasut wants to come take the children away and make them into birds, but she doesn't want that because they're immortal, but once they become birds, they will die. But I think it's a great, again, a little bit great of a creation story, right? Where the tale of Seta and the moon but just Simon listening to that. That's where we get a very slight POV shift, right? Binabik is telling the stories from Simon's point of view, but by the end of the story, Simon's asleep. So the POV just basically detaches from him, and in a movie style fashion, it's locked on to Binabik.
Yeah.
So that's a great scene, great story. And you get more exposure to Binabik, and you really start to endear yourself to him. But he's too smart and too wise to be the main character, right? Otherwise, the story would only be a book or two long. Yeah, he knows too much.
But he speaks for the reader a few times when he's kind of instructing Simon. Even from the first chapter we meet him, when he's like, "You're not gonna cry again, are you?"
I had to put that in our intro. You won't be crying again, will you?
I like page 266 where he tells Simon, "Do not fight the entering of knowledge."
I think we have the same line highlighted, right?
Yeah.
Is that where he's where Binabik is talking to the wolf at first, and then he comes back. Please forgive me by my speaking, but you have made my point. He held his hand up to stall Simon's question. The youth felt a little twitching in his lips and the slight of little troll so rapt and serious. First, said Binabik, Scullion boys are not from fish spawned or chicken eggs hatched. They can be thinking like the wisest wise folk if only they do not fight entering knowledge, if they do not say can't or won't. Now, I was explaining what I was going to do about you. Do you mind? I like that little line. Don't say can't or won't. And it gives a little bit of a harken back to Morganus, right? Stop asking so many questions. I'm not done telling you the first question you asked.
Well, it's kind of encouraging. Like Morganis was saying, be careful about what doors you open, because you don't know what might come through once you've opened that door. But on the flip side, we can close the door to knowledge and keep ourselves locked off and shut off from new ideas and from realizing truths about the world, realizing what's going on around ourselves. And now Binabik is saying you gotta keep the curious part of your mind open to hearing to seeing what's going on or in the world around you, and to hearing ideas too.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's a little bit of a danger that Simon gets himself into by just continuously rapid fire asking questions. And they can't keep up to him. But Binabik tries to encourage him. It's like, don't stop asking questions, just slow down so I can answer them. So,
right.
Go ahead, Scott.
It's also an interesting technique of characterization. And when you have like in science fiction, it might be an alien character, or a character speaks a different language. Like, how do you could depict a character speaking a different language? Like, even if it's just like Spanish or Russian, but you can, like, a decent writer, you can tell the character is speaking Russian because the grammar, the structure is different. And a lot of it is probably hackneyed from movies and stuff. But the way Binabik phrases that, do not fight entering knowledge. We know what he's saying, but it's an interesting way to phrase that. And you know that Simon has no capacity to unpack that to what he's trying to tell him. And so it's a little bit of it makes his speech feel unique, his troll speech and the way the troll thinks.
He's a little.
And I think that's good. I think a lot of
Yoda here, a little bit of Yoda.
Yeah, a lot of the favorite characters I've ever written, like in Dark Landing, I had a side character. It was an Unguluk, and he would say muchly a lot, and people latched on to. He's like, "That's I'm muchly." I had to try to think of some examples, but he would use muchly when it's not really a word. But people love that, and they love those weird little twists. And you see it in movies where they basically reverse word order, or like they might say the face of books when they mean Facebook, and everybody chuckles because they got it wrong because they don't speak English or whatever. But anyway, so I observed that. That's one of the things that makes Binabik special, is some of the way he talks when he tells these stories.
Yeah, he's not the typical troll, but he endears himself to both the Simon bit and the reader very much so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
I still can't get over that he's a troll, not a troll.
He might be the typical troll for all we know, because maybe our version was descended from the Rimmersmen. And we're just getting this biased version, like through their stories and tales, and now we're meeting the real thing.
Maybe there's some trolls or trolls watching this show right now going, oh, we're going to reach out.
History is written by the ones that were left behind, right? Or the winners, I guess, in a way.
We're going to explain Bigfoot here in a second, too.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Bigfoot here in a minute.
Yeah.
I think this was, again, one of those reactionary chapters or chapters where Simon is just spending time with Binabik and just finding out how smart and wise and clever he is, right?
It's kind of a traveling chapter. I've always thought of him as when there's not as much like fighting or magic happening, especially in fantasy. A lot of times it's a traveling chapter because they got to go from point A to point B, and something's got to happen while they're doing that. And it's a good time to kind of recover from the battle they just fled or the danger they just escaped and stuff too, like you said.
I guess another little thing I like about this chapter is that, Binabik is weaving this story of his creation story of his people, but he already acknowledges the Sith were there before him, and they already named all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they already named it, so we just renamed it.
Why do you call it that? And he's like, well, I've been around.
Well, and also that they're all brothers and sisters too. Like the Sitha, the trolls, the humans, they're all descended from this couple, and their bird offspring. There's birds again.
Yep, birds. That's a great reference, Lauren. You really point that out. Like the Lord of Birds isn't very nice, but it is a lot of references to birds, and Seta has a relationship with birds. And of course,
that's definitely not something I picked up the first time I read it. Is that? But it is. But when you, in hindsight, it's like there is a strong theme of. I wonder if he did that intentionally, or if he just got some secret bird subliminal stuff going on.
Got some bird poop in there.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you hit upon. I think personally, I think if you try to write a theme, you're probably going to really screw it up. Themes come out on their own, and I think that you try to write a powerful story with and stuff, then the themes will come out. If you just write crap, you might get a theme. But if you say, I'm going to write a book, the theme is about this, that's probably going to be terrible. But so I'm curious to how themes emerge, and then maybe it's more of a matter of recognizing the theme when it kind of arises out of the shape of the rock, and then you kind of sculpt it. But there's just kind of bird theme here.
It's a push-pull thing, right? So if you've read John Truby's book, he says, have a theme in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read Stephen Pressfield, he says the theme will come after you write the first draft, right? When you read it, the theme will come, and then you can go back and, if you want to, if you need to, you can reinforce the theme. But
and I guess it really depends on
is it evolutionary or revolutionary, or do you start at the beginning or do you start at the end? I don't know.
It depends on your concept of theme and what you think in. I think a lot of people misconstrue theme as a moral point of some sort, and that's not the same thing.
Well, there's themes and there's motifs. Like the birds are a motif. They're a reoccurring symbol that's coming up throughout the story. But yeah, theme would be like a one-word sentence, kind of what the central idea at the heart of the story, and that can be a moral thing. Like it could be that like love conquers all, or
the weak learn who they are and become the hero of the story.
Yeah,
like
that your weaknesses can be a strength.
Yeah,
that could be a theme too.
What's a Joe Abercrombie theme? Nothing you do matters.
Yeah, you're all going to die. Everybody's going back to the mud. Back to the mud.
Yeah, like one of the things about Game of Thrones that kind of got me is I felt like, and I could be wrong because I haven't asked the author, I don't know, but I felt like the theme was the good-hearted will lose. Like if you're a man of integrity and honesty, you will lose because cheaters survive. Cheaters can cut.
That's a hard question to answer because the series isn't finished.
And
you're right. You are absolutely right. We don't know who ultimately comes out on top, but both good and bad people lose.
You can definitely come out with that, and I think it's leaning towards that. But I take it as like what you said, Lauren. But also, it's more of a good nice guys finish last. But it makes you want to root for. You're always looking for the nice guy or whatever, the good person, and wanting them to be good. One, because the other theme other commonality with George R. R. Martin stuff is just when you think a character is good, they do something totally shitty.
Well, that's how they survive. Like they can't make it. They can't make it in that world without becoming evil. They either die or they start to embrace like selfishness or greed or ambition, or one of those things becomes their fire to give them passion, and they start to make choices based on that passion, and then they can slay their enemies. But otherwise they just get killed by everyone.
They just get killed
and cut corners.
And so for me, I find myself rooting for somebody to be good and win. And even if it's a small battle. And so that's why I think I identify with that. It's not because I like seeing everybody get killed and have all this murder and sex and stuff. It's because I'm like, I want that character to do the right thing so powerfully. And so I'm just reading to see if, Sandor Clegane will finally make that transformation where he's a good guy. And he starts being more good than bad, but he's still capable.
Yeah,
of.
you start end up being like Thomas Edison, right? You're like, one success is built on 1,000 failures. Like, when are you going to do one good thing? I
Yeah.
need that one good thing to
Yeah.
turn you, away from being such a horrible person. Some people are irredeemable. They don't.
But like
have
in a
any
book like
interest
this,
in
I
it, right?
severely doubt that Morganus is going to be I don't see him or hope for him to be redeemable because I just can't see it. However, Elias, he has that moment where he really cares for his daughter. So I'm like, well, maybe he's not all bad. Maybe he's gonna do the right thing, but I don't think he is. He's gonna be
We'll
weak.
have to wait and see.
Oh, I'm trying to remember the name of this CW show that had fairy tale characters crossing into real life. Maybe it was Ever After. It's not right. But they had
Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Time. Yeah, they had this villain
Not that I
woman
watch it or anything.
from Snow White,
Yeah.
and she was also a complicated villain where she had a lot of ambition, and again, she was willing to like cut corners and betray people to get what she wanted, but she also like loved her son. But then the good guys would use her love for her son to trick her and to trap her. So every time she started to have a redeeming moment and she started to like recognize she'd done wrong, recognize she'd made a mistake, she'd lied or something, and kind of feel guilty about it, want to sort of repent and turn around, then they would use that repentance to trick her and trap her.
Yeah.
And I was like, the good guys, I'm so upset at you right now because you're making the villain regret, repenting.
Isn't that the old the Spaceballs reference, right? This is why evil will always win because good is so dumb.
Yeah. So dumb. But kind of true in some ways.
Some ways. I feel like that may be a little bit of George R. R. Martin's theme, not to get off of Ted Williams, but it's not enough to just have a good heart. You've got to have a will and strength and wisdom to go behind it, right?
You're gonna have to
be
have
smart
some
enough
grit.
to not be fooled, to have strength to resist, being stabbed in the back, all of these things.
You're gonna have to be strong enough to stand up for yourself in a world like that, and smart enough to get yourself out of trouble, and you got to bring your A game, kind of, I guess. If you're living in the Song of Ice and Fire, then you better bring your A game, or else you're back to the mud, like Joanna Abercrombie.
Yeah, back to the mud.
Back to the mud.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah.
So where are we at? Where are we on chapter?
That was chapter 18, and I think we're into chapter 19, which is the Blood of Saint Hodorund, which is an interesting change, and we get a little bit of. So in the previous chapter, it was basically all about Binabik in the wilderness. So Simon didn't have, you weren't mixing, peanut butter and chocolate of all the different worlds that Simon is now a part of, right? He's in the wilderness with Binabik. But now we come to the Abbey, where is echoes of Simon's previous life, right? Which is the Edenites, the Edenite monks, the monastery. I think I call it an abbey. I think it's a monastery. But Simon and Binabik travel. So put a bit of a travel chapter, right? They're still hoofing it along, and they come upon the monastery, and he's telling them the story about this, which again tells you more about Binabik than it tells you about the actual saint, right? They're walking across the fields of the dead, and Binabik is telling them the story about the battle, right? Between the Rimmersman and the, I think it's Hernistiri and the Sitha, who were actually at one time friends. So, and I think that's an interesting story. It's not incredibly insightful, but I feel it told me a lot more about Binabik than it did about the story itself.
Yeah, and it might have been a little bit of a foreshadowing, because when we get to the Abbey, it's another field of dead men, and the one man who's alive that we meet is a Rimmersman.
Oh, that's a good that's a good point. You know, it's
Meeting-
it's
meeting
it's
a troll.
repetition, right? They go through
Yeah.
a boneyard, and Simon has the shivers of the boneyard, right? The premonitions of being in the lich yard, you know, which calls back to him fleeing, and then the field of the dead, and then they come upon the monastery, and then guess what? More dead people. You know, not great for Simon.
No.
Who's having a rough time of it. Yeah. And then the Riversmen, I guess, is was Hangfisk or Henfish if you're Binabik. And there are three monks, I guess. It looks like the monastery's been attacked.
Yeah.
And nobody knows what's going on. It feels like a little bit of one of those Nancy Drew mysteries. What happened here? You got one guy who was not there, another guy who's got a scalp wound or knocked senseless, and another guy who's crazy. It's hard to say what's going on with this guy. I think Docaeus and I forget the other guy. I can't pronounce the other
Well,
guy's
as soon as
name. I'm terrible
as
with
soon
these
as I
names.
read this scene, I'm immediately, because the characters don't know what's going on. Maybe Benedict, but and maybe I skipped too far ahead. But they're like, why would they attack here? But I'm immediately going, well, Joshua's going this way. They're probably looking for him. They're probably and so I'm suspicious that this is dark work.
Yeah, they're first responders on the scene of a destroyed abbey, like trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
So,
and
what do you think?
it must have
Scott
happened
as the first responder in real life.
As Binabik? Binabik, yes. Simon, no. Simon's like,
Yeah. Well, they look for survivors, don't they?
yeah, they do look for They look for survivors, and Binabik, being smart, sends the wolf to find living people.
Find living people, and then Simon gets himself some boots, which probably a good decision.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we've learned. He had a crappy pair of boots when he ran away, and he only got worse as he kept wandering around in the woods, not doing anything useful. And I think Binabik identified, you need better boots to travel with.
Yeah,
right?
he needs lots of stuff, and he should probably be getting it if he's going to survive very long.
Here's a bit of and this is probably something that we see often in fantasy is callbacks, right? We got a couple of callbacks here. The guy the Docaeus, brother Docaeus, who's don't know if he's really hurt or not, but he's a little crazy, it seems like, and he cries out for the black wagon, right? The black wagon, I see it, it's coming for me. And that's the third time we've seen the black wagon. Well, the second time we actually saw the black wagon, right? So it was the story in the beginning hinting about the black wagon, but it was a rumor where they thought it was John Presbyter, right? The ghost of Prester John riding about Urchester, and then you see the black wagon with the Norns or the White Foxes upon the Angerstone or the Angerstones at Thistleborg, and now you see the black wagon again here in which just tells you that if the black wagon is involved, bad things happened. It was probably not good guys, right?
Yeah,
so almost telling that it was a bad guy taking care of business here. So.
Is this a chapter where one of the characters they discover talks about the weather changing or something? Or
I don't think that was this one. Maybe it was in the next chapter. I think that was. But this chapter was relatively short, I thought. It was, again, a little bit of a traveling chapter. A lot of choppy short scenes. And I think as you discussed or pointed out, Scott, that they do that to show time passing, right? Little vignettes. It's like a little montage that you would put in a film, right?
So
Here
the
he's
book's
riding
about
over here, and
6,000
he
pages
rides
long.
past a tree. Rides past a tree. And, This is a good chapter. The ending of going to the monastery, I kind of enjoyed that. You get your suspicions. Again, it reinforces the suspicion between Rimmersman and trolls or trawls. With the actual troll and a Rimmersman, right? Who's supposed to be a God-fearing Edenite. But I think this actually has a couple of really interesting things, at least in my mind. Religious symbolism. I mean, Tad really just steeps the world in religion. And the uniqueness about this is the monotheistic culture, right? He's like, instead of a cross, it's an upside down tree, right? The hanging man in the tree, right, which is Osiris, right? And he really puts all that into, but he adds all the layers of things that you would have from like a Roman Catholic thing, like a saint that tried to stop a battle and all kinds of stuff like that. So again, he's just borrowing pieces of real history and reassembling them into the secondary world. I don't know, in a unique way. I don't think I've seen very many monotheistic religions portrayed very closely, to a real world religion before. I mean, if you've read The Wheel of Time, their religion is super generic. It's like the light and the dark. And that's it. There's just like no God. It's very simple. So I mean, there's a lot of more. There's more to the magic and the history than there is to the religion itself. So anyway. I like chapter 19, but chapter 20 is a great chapter. So good, Scott. Sorry, I talked over you.
No, say if you go too far into the religion, it becomes a different type of story, obviously, and it tends to wind up more like a kind of a Greek mythology influenced fantasy or Norse mythology. It seems like most of the fantasy I've read, when they start really getting into religion, it starts feeling like a pantheon type of situation because that's very convenient for storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I think we've gotten a lot of hints here in Osten Ard that it's not a religion. It's not one religion for everyone. It's not unified. Right? Urchester has, and I guess the High Kingdom has Edenites, that religion, but the Hinisteri are more pagan or polytheistic, and certainly the Canuck are more polytheistic, kind of a little bit, I won't say primitive, but it's more an older religion.
Nature religion type thing.
Nature religion, thank you.
But the
nature-based religion.
These gods also are characters too that touched history in some way. Like, we're not sure if it's the way that's necessarily the mythology kind of laid out, like it's literally happened, if it's literally true. But you can tell there's a connection between the gods and these different religions and history. So there's something that was there in the past, and now the past is catching up with the present. We've got this prince who's calling himself a Storm King and seems to be like having some kind of god-like powers, who's affecting the history of affecting the world as it's going on right now and affecting our plot. So there's something to the religions that is kind of connecting with the plot too, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, we don't have enough information about Inaluki to know what is going on. What's his game?
Who and how and why?
What are you doing and where do you come from?
Yes.
Tell me more.
But these dreams that are hitting Simon are, they're more than just a story that he's hearing around the campfire. It's coming into his consciousness and affecting him. He's seeing stuff, he's hearing stuff, and he's not sure if it's coming from his own brain or if it's coming from outside of it and just hitting him. So there's more there.
I feel like this scene, or this chapter, I love this opening scene to the Shadow of the Wheel, chapter 20, but I feel like it almost just hits you over the head with the obvious trope of Simon's now special, because it literally, the character says, you have been marked.
Yeah.
This guy's important. I just said it. He's got, the bad guy knows that you're there.
Right.
But how important really is Simon, right? He's just a scullion at this point. But it's something about his dreams or his ability to dream is really affecting. Maybe it's just because he's encountered magic that now he's, as you said, Lauren, he's able to touch the membrane between the portals, he's the membrane of the world of the
thin
magic
spots,
and
yeah.
the thin spots. Maybe he's able to touch that with his mind in dreams. He doesn't seem to be able to do it consciously, except perhaps maybe when he was going a little crazy and getting lost in the tunnels. But it's much more obvious in his dreams. And again, we get the big black wheel, right? But now the black wheel is the side, it's as tall as the sky, right? And it's dragging him along. He gets run over and he gets driven into the ground, and he's being grabbed at by, again, dreams of undead people grabbing him, which I think is probably a mixing up. And I love playing with dream motifs, but you can. I struggle with them. You can screw it up. You can screw them up. You can make it too obvious or make it less obvious. But I feel like Tad Williams did a great job of mixing the magical with some of Simon's just normal fears, because he just walked over a boneyard of dead people to get to the monastery, and now he's having dreams of dead people trying to grab him. Right?
It seems like there's a little more dream each time there's a dream too.
Yeah.
But I think dream things are fun to write. I think you can almost feel him just kind of taking off when he was writing this scene.
They're a lot of fun, and you can get a little carried away with them. Yeah. I think dreams are very difficult to do. As I said, I think you can make mistakes with dreams by using them as plot vehicles rather than just reflections of the character of what could be of the story, right? Or just the reality of the character. He's scared out of his wits. But I love the scene. I even love the opening sentence, right? It lands him into another world, and you don't know if he's actually dreaming or not, right? Because you don't get any hints of it until he sees the black wheel itself, right? So yeah. Anyway, I think they're still at the monastery, and I think this is where he's looking for boots. Actually, they're looking for bodies, right? They're looking for other people, other things.
Yeah, he lets the cat loose.
Simon wanders off. He's hungry. There's not much food in Binabik's bag, so he tells him to go get some water by the stream, and Simon does a little bit of a sulking and starts reading a little bit more of Morgana's manuscript, and I think there's a great little passage there. Did you catch that one, Lauren? I think it's a good little passage you might like.
That's on page 302.
Yeah, I think where it says neither war nor violent death. I think that's a great passage.
Have anything uplifting about them, yet they are a candle to which humanity flies again and again, as complacently as the lowly moth. He who has been upon a battlefield, and who is not blinded by popular conceptions, will confirm that on this ground mankind seems to have created a hell on earth out of sheer impatience, rather than waiting for that original to which, if the priests are correct, most of us will eventually be ushered. Still, it is the field of war that determines those things that God has forgotten, accidentally or not, what mortal can know, to order and arrange. Hence, it is often the arbiter of divine will, and violent death is its law scribe. Simon smiled and drank a little water. He finally
gets. I don't think he quite gets it, but I think he gets a little bit of a glimmer. He's like, certainly for him, he hasn't been in a war yet, but certainly death is not as a good idea as he thought it would be.
Yeah, he has an experience with death.
Yeah. So, but he does get a little bit of back. Again, he needs some. I guess he's needing some comfort because he's seeing a lot of death right now, and going back and reading Morgana's work really brings it back to him. Yet my favorite is another passage. I think it's on the next page or two. Is a character I was hinting at Lauren before we started. Recall in the first book chat that, and I think Tad Williams's initial discussion here was, or initial premise for Osten Ard or the man we saw on Thorn was, what if King Arthur had lived out a full life and what happens after that? Well, if you know anything, even the barest minimum of King Arthur, there was at least 3 or 4 important characters in his life. Certainly King Arthur himself, which is John Presbyter, his wife, who I think is the queen. She's passed away long before. And then what makes up the Holy Trinity, or the triad of a typical Arthurian tale, is Lancelot character. And I think you see this in Camarus is the, in my opinion, the Lancelot type character. And he has... And you get the hint for the third sword, right? So now in this novel, in 40% into the book, you get the third sword, right? So Sorrow is Inaluki's black blade, which is now Prince Elias's blade. Mm-hmm. Memory is Bright Nail.
Memory is Bright Nail?
Memory is Bright Nail.
Oh, which is buried with...
And Thorn is Camarus's sword. Right, it's literally right on the page. The sword is named Thorn, so it's called Bright Nail, but I think it had a different name before it was called Bright Nail. Maybe if I learn that later.
Oh, okay.
So those are the 3. Those are just a little bit of the spoilers, but I think you'll enjoy the spoiler review there.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
But I like what's great about this passage by Morganus about Camarus. Is it is completely counter to the bardic story of Camarus, Scott. Right, Camarus, he's laughing and loving killing people. Right, he's like, take that. But Morganus's take on him was he did not like the fight, so he was the reluctant warrior. Right, so he was kind of the guy that he didn't want to fight, but when if he had to fight, by God, he was going to finish it, right?
Gonna win.
That's the kind of character it was, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost argued in Morganus's passage here that he is either an equal or possibly a better warrior than King John ever was. So, yeah.
But those two both had like special swords.
Yeah, they both had special swords, right? You know, when your sword has got a name, it's important. And we know that Bright Nail is a holy sword, right? So Elias did not want to touch it, or I should say a divine or righteous sword. And Sorrow perhaps is not. But we don't know what Thorn is, nor do we know where Thorn is. So.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting conundrum from a writing perspective. Is so, if you set up good versus evil, what's the third one? And how do you make that convincing and original and stuff? So we'll see when we get there.
Yeah, is it binary, or is there some is it a triangle? Some sort of ritual. I don't know.
Yeah, let's figure out what we do with that.
It's probably been too long because I remember what they were actually done. What they were for, but
yeah, I definitely am practically a new reader with this. It's been very fresh. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's great. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I certainly do remember Sir Camarus, and I think it's because he comes over the eventuality of the story. We learn more and more about him and the history of him as a character, and a little bit of the story between him and Prester John as well. So, and that's interesting, right? Because think about it, Prester John died with the people around him, but you don't know very much of the people around him, right? There's a couple of knights, but there's nobody of like true renown that's been around John. Of course, John lived an extremely long life, right? I think he died when he was 90, which is probably 20 or 30 years longer than probably the average lifespan of someone in that era. And then we have a couple of scenes that I really like. that Tad Williams does kind of some interesting thing. He's like he writes two scenes and basically tells you exactly what happens in the beginning of the scene. Right? He's like, two things happened that afternoon.
Yeah.
One guy died, and he goes, the second thing happened that afternoon. It's just basically two scenes in a row that basically just telegraphs what I'm going to tell you, which I don't know if that's a bad thing or not. I don't know.
I really like those storytelling sentences. Yeah, every once in a while, the narrator comes out and just talks to the audience, and it's endearing. Like just a little bit here and there adds so much.
You do it just right.
Yeah.
Yes. I thought he did it quite well. So I thought it was a little bit humorous, because it was kind of like, hey, two things happened today in this scene to get moving along into the next chapter.
A type of hook. It's a type of hook, because like you walk into the squad room at the end of the day and you said two things happened on that call. We'll be like, well, now I have to know.
I know. What are these two things?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first thing is that Dokeus dies, right? And he's not the one that was that had the head wound, right? He was the crazy one. And he just starts talking, and I think he says something. Oh, what was his final words? Oh, Storm King. Quite obviously a bad guy. Right?
Yeah.
So, but the problem is, what happened that night to cause him to think about the Storm King? It didn't seem like it made any sense, because he told the second character, what was that brother's name? I'm gonna mess it up again.
My name's
Aimfist and Langrian.
Langrian. Right after that, Langrian tells them what happened, right? Some unsavory people came to the monastery, but they weren't there just to stay the night. They were waiting for someone, looking for someone. And then come to find out they were waiting for someone that was coming, and I think it was a troop of Rimmersmen that were coming. And the monastery spoiled the attack, right? And of course the I guess Erkengard, I think it might be Erkengard, but maybe Elias's men killed everyone in the monastery. So
yeah,
well, most everybody. So it's interesting. I guess I feel like the scene echoes back to Isgrimner, right? Isgrimner is trying to get word to his people, and then trying to get his people to come get him because nobody will let him leave, right? So is this troop some of Isgrimner's Rimmersmen to come fetch him, or come fortify him or support him? I don't know. It's not really told, but because we just don't have enough information. Simon doesn't know enough. Binabik doesn't know enough. None of the monks know enough. So
I think we get some of that in chapter 21, because I accidentally went too far.
You read it ahead.
Just throwing that out there.
Okay. You tried to overachieve.
Yeah, get a head start so I'm not behind next week.
And I think the second thing was so we got the two things. Quite obviously came from the two monks that were alive, right? Or one was alive, then he died, and then the other one came out of his, I guess, coma, and told them the story of what happened. And then Simon, they buried Dokeus, and they have an argument over burying all of the other monks. And Binabik's like, "What? We got places to be and things to do." But although we don't know what that is, Binabik's like, "Hey, we gotta take off."
Wolves got to eat. Carrion birds got to eat.
Yeah,
that doesn't go over well when he uses that line.
Yep. And then before they leave, I think Simon has to wander around and get a new pair of boots, and he happens upon a very nice Book of Eden, right, which is I guess their Bible. And I thought that was really interesting. I took the little note of what was written in the book, because he thought it would just say, this is George's Bible given to him by, love mom and dad, kind of thing. But it just has like a scribbled phrase in it, right? Piercing my heart is a golden dagger. That is God. Piercing God's heart, there is a golden needle. That is me. Thought was an interesting turn of phrase. And I don't know if that's Ted Williams just waxing lyrical or he just stuck it in the book.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I wondered about that too. I'm like, am I supposed to be getting something from that more than what it is? I was trying to remember it, but
it's almost like a psalm, right? You're like, well, it could have a couple meanings. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then he gets a pair of boots and he's starting to wander past after Binabik, right? And then wait, not alone, right? That's kind of a little bit of
I'm captured.
Wait, I'm captured again.
Why does this keep happening to me?
Why does this keep happening to me? Actually, I don't think Simon's actually been captured before yet, but he almost got captured at the end, right? And
but this time he's definitely captured. We almost got captured.
This time he's totally captured. That's the end of chapter 20. The book is really like hitting a stride now, and I'm really enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it, Lauren.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Scott,
definitely picking up.
It's picking up, right? It's got a good cadence now. I think we're getting the pace. We've spent, what was that? The first 10 chapters just sitting around the hay-holt. And then we spent the previous 5 chapters running away from the hay-holt. And then this chapter we spend still traveling, but now we have a mentor and a companion, and now we're already into deep trouble. So we didn't get very far without Simon getting into trouble immediately. So
yeah.
I don't think I had any other. Did you guys have any good sentences from this chapter? I don't know. I had a couple, but
I'm trying to think.
We kind of covered the ones I was thinking of.
Oh, I did have one about where he was waxing a little poetical about the dead bodies. Simon did say, each one of these ruined sacks of bone and sweetbreads had been a life once, a beating heart, a voice that complained or laughed or sang. That was a little heartrending.
That's good. Well, it's he's so young to be thinking in end of life terms, but I feel like a lot of the characters are reminding us that we're mortal. Like we humans are mortal, and we need to have that kind of mindset that we only have, a short amount of time to get the mission done, to do the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. Simon is, he's had to learn very quickly, right? He's seen death already. He's seen bad things happen. He's had to kill somebody. And he's come upon a field of murder, right? He hasn't been involved in a battle yet, but he's seen the result, right? And
he's going to grow up quicker than he would have.
It's changed him, right? He's become a little bit more philosophical, besides wanting to eat something. Seems to be seriously hungry. I think that's all I have for this chapter. I don't know if you had anything else, Scott.
No, I'm actually very interested in the next chapter, but that's gonna have to wait until
So next reading assignment is chapters 21 through 25. I think that will take us to about the halfway point in the book, and it'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of turn at that point, right? Typically midpoint of the book, there is something somewhere around there that turns it into the second half of the book. But I'm not sure because it's the beginning of the trilogy, so I don't think we're going to get quite a big turn. So does he get the Dragonbone? Who knows? And why is the story still about the Dragonbone chair? He left that thing way behind.
It's true.
So it's something to do with the air. I'm guessing. I've been getting up earlier again because it's school time, so I'm gonna get up at 4 again now. So it's like you could see my bedtime hit. I'm like, oh, I'm about to die. It hits me like a car.
We hit your limit.
I know.
You need to have the strength of, what is it? The strength of trees.
I need the strength of trees.
The strength of trees.
Yeah. Give me some tree strength in my coffee.
Tree strength. Yeah, tree strength coffee.
Yeah. The Entwater.
But I think that's it for now. I think we're still hitting on our 1 hour and a half of talking about 5 chapters.
That's about what it takes. Well,
there was always something to talk about. I think that's what's fascinating about reading epic fantasy, especially something that's quite well written by an author that's been around a while. And, I think he wrote this when he was in his late 20s, early 30s. So it still has, steeped in a lot of well thought out things. So,
well, it is very interesting that the process of getting a book into print in the 90s was much different, and there's a lot of big hurdles to go through, and
Right.
to have maintained a career for this long, and it's you want to know why. How did you do that? How did you write a book that's so powerful that you can do a book a year, and like they used to do?
Maybe at the end of this, we'll have to have him on again, and we'll be able to ask him.
Yeah, he's like,
Ted,
I just read your book.
come back.
We want to talk about it. We talk about some more. We want to talk about cool stuff. Oh, before we go though, Lauren, did you want to show up that link? I dug around and found something interesting on the internet, Scott, that you might enjoy. I think I put it in the private chat link.
Oh, okay.
Did you see that? If you could show that, I just thought it'd be nice to scroll down a little bit. This is a web page. I think it's called ostenard.com, and I think Tad had sent some pictures of the original notebooks that he was working on the story in. Not to go down memory lane, but hey, man, those 5 subject notebooks, spiral books, Scott, those things still exist, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And he was writing it down in hand. So yeah, scroll down.
All right.
Keep going. It's about midway through the page, I think. Yeah. Yep. Keep going. Here we go. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Check out this book. It's there were computers back then, but they were not as commonplace as they are now, right? So I think a lot of his initial writings was long form, right? I think Josh will appreciate
some
this.
brainstorming and stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think that first page that you showed was the actual prologue. He wrote the thing about mad priestesses or something like that. The book about mad priestesses, right? And
the first several books I attempted to write, or I wrote them. I say attempted; they did get finished, but I don't think that anybody should ever see them, and I'm not sure I could find them. But they actually, I know where they're at. But I'd have all these notebooks, and I would handwrite them. And then I would type them and print them on my dot matrix printer eventually when I could afford it. Yeah. It's a different process.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I still have papers that were written in spiral when I was a teenager in high school. And I think I have I have a small stack of legal pads when I decided I enjoyed writing on yellow paper. I don't know why.
Well, some of the old stories I may have had to throw some of them away because we went through a lot of stuff when we moved because they were, water damaged and the spirals had started to rust on some of them. And it was just I don't think anybody cares about these that much. They're not making it to a museum. I think I'm special, but I think these are not being kept for posterity. They're going out, but
Da Vinci stuff has been around for 1,000 years now.
Da Vinci.
No. I have a few back.
And back then they used to paint on top of paintings, right? It's that wasn't a good painting. Paint over that and do something better. Mona Lisa, sure.
When you used to write a letter and then write again the other way, and I was like, that must have been really hard to figure out what that was saying because the paper was so rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
thanks for
that was a
leading
little
us.
bit of a tidbit.
Yeah. Thanks for leading us on our adventure today.
Yeah.
This one's been fun. I think we're gonna keep a good clip all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to spoil the warnings. I think the second book is a slow burn to build to that bigger arc of the final 2 books, which was one book, but it couldn't be printed into one book because it was so big,
so
in
massive
paperback form that it got to be split into 2. Yeah.
So we just gotta like hang on, but enjoy the journey along the way. We're picking up these
Enjoy the
tips.
journey, you know, point out certain things. Look at that over there. Look at that milestone. Look at that
Yeah.
birds, more bird references. I didn't pay attention to the bird references that you're picking up on, Lauren.
Bird motifs.
So yeah, the
Motifs,
bird
motifs,
motifs, yeah.
The motif.
Motifs.
I'm going to motif the hell out of my stories now. Everybody's getting motif. Motif for you, motif for you.
Yeah, everybody gets a motif, right?
Oh boy, your editor, she's gonna come after me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh boy, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we have for tonight.
Well,
But,
we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for coming with us on our journey. And if you haven't read the book, get started. You're behind by about 20 chapters. So
Barely an inconvenience. Just speed through. Got
yeah,
it.
barely. Yeah, super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Super
Yeah. 1.5 times speed on the audiobook. You'll catch up.
Boom.
There you go.
Done.
Yep.
All
right.
I think that's all we have for tonight. Great.
All right.
Awesome.
Y'all have a good
Thanks,
good
Lauren.
night.
Thanks, Scott.